Hello, this is Judy, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the July 16th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I will do my best to pronounce all names and words correctly, yet please forgive me if I do not. And here is our first article. The title is Brad Bradford has already raised $1.8 million for his Toronto mayoral campaign. Here's what that might mean for his chances of beating Olivia Chow. In a little over 2 months, the Beaches East York councillor has raised more than twice what he took in for his unsuccessful 2023 mayoral run. And this article is written by Ben Spurr, and that's Spurr, who is a City Hall bureau chief. Brad Bradford said he's raised $1.8 million for his Toronto mayoral campaign, a display of financial firepower that would further solidify his evolution from an also-ran 3 years ago into a serious challenger for the city's top job. Bradford's teams announced a fundraising haul this week. On the same day, the councillor for Beaches East York held his first campaign rally at the Etobicoke Community Center. While his political opponents argue that money doesn't translate into votes on election day and that Mayor Olivia Chow can expect her own flood of donations as she ramps up her campaign, a spokesperson for Bradford's team said the nearly $2 million in contribution reflects real momentum. This level of support means we have the resources to compete in every quarter of Toronto, says Isha Chaudhuri, and that's Chaudhuri. Fundraising figures send strong message from Bradford's campaign. Bradford reached the $1.8 million amount in just more than 2 months. He registered for the October 26th election on May 1st, the day nominations opened. He's already taken in more than twice than the $780,000 he raised for his run in the 2023 mayoral by-election, in which he received slightly more than 1% of the vote and finished 8th. He's also raised more than the roughly $1.6 million Chow spent to win the race that year. Zachary Taylor, director of Western University Local Government Program, said it's kind of astonishing that the councillor has raised so much at this early stage. He said it's an indication that Bradford has become the consensus candidate among more right-leaning donors hoping to block Chow, a veteran progressive, from a second term. Taylor said it's also evidence that Bradford's strategy of trying to discourage like-minded challengers from entering the race has paid off. Since 2023, he's made himself Chow's most persistent critic on the council, criticizing her over tax increases and traffic problems, and held campaign-style policy announcements for months before he formally declared his 2026 run. Recent public opinion polls show the mayor is still ahead of Bradford in voting intentions, but that her advantage is narrowing. It's still possible for another big-name challenger to enter the race before the nominations close on August 21st. The Star reported Thursday that former Conservative MP Chris Alexander is mulling a run, but Taylor said that the fundraising announcement sends a very strong message that Bradford's got the money and it will be very hard for someone of the same ideological persuasion to compete. Chow campaign won't say how much she's raised. The fundraising figures mean Bradford will likely have a full war chest to take on the mayor. The city won't officially announce the election spending limit until the fall, but it's expected to be a little more than $1.6 million. The most well-funded campaigns can be expected to spend more than $2 million, including costs that aren't subject to the spending limit. Chow announced in May she's running for re-election, but has said she's focused on building a more affordable and safer city and won't start campaigning in earnest until September. Her election team won't reveal this week how much she's raised, saying it would have more to say about internal processes and details when the campaign launches. But I can tell you that Olivia Chow will be running a campaign that spends the maximum allowable amount, said campaign spokesperson Devin Sissons. Money doesn't win elections, critics argue. The executive director of Progress Toronto, a third-party advocacy group that is backing Chow, said Bradford's fundraising prowess doesn't mean he's on course for victory. Olivia Chow won in 2023 despite being outspent by her opponents. A big fundraising total tells you a candidate knows people with money. It doesn't tell you he has support across the city. Samin Tabinejad said in an email, noting that in the by-election, Chow relied on smaller donations from a larger number of people compared to Bradford and other opponents. Money doesn't vote, people do, she stated. Tabinejad said it's no surprise that Bradford is racking up contributions because he has effectively been running for mayor since the 2023 election ended. Given that head start, a bigger total from deep-pocketed donors isn't surprising, and it isn't momentum, she said. Conservative liberal figures running Bradford's campaign. In addition to raising money, Bradford has been busy assembling a campaign team that includes well-known operatives from conservative and liberal circles. Mike Van Schoen, and that's Soelen, a partner at the Oyster Group public affairs firm, and former liberal strategist Genevieve Tomei are co-chairs, while his campaign is being managed by John Sinclair, former deputy chief of staff to Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre. Sinclair was also chief of staff for Scarborough Road Park councillor Jennifer McKeevy, and that's McKelvie, as well as executive director of the Toronto PC caucus under Premier Doug Ford. Warren Kinsella, the controversial former Liberal strategist who led Chow's war room during her 2014 mayoral campaign, and John Broadhead, and that's Brodhead, one-time policy director to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, are senior advisors. Larissa Wahler, Waller, Ford's former executive director of communications, is Bradford's communications director, while Isha Chaudhuri, and that's Chaudhuri, former communications advisor to Ontario PC Minister of Energy and Mines Stephen Lecce, Lecce, is press secretary. Chow's team declined to provide a list of senior staffers, saying it would release details at a later date. And Ben Spur is the Star's City Hall bureau chief based in Toronto. You can reach him via email at bsprurr@THESTAR.ca. Our next article is about British Columbia, and the title is BC Nurses Expand Picket Lines to Vancouver Island at Nanaimo Hospital. And this article is written by the Canadian Press. British Columbia nurses have expanded picket lines to Vancouver Island, with the escalated job action now reaching Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. The BC Nurses Union says in an email that the picket line at the hospital was put in place earlier today, and President Adrienne Gear, GEAR, is scheduled to attend. The union, representing 60,000 nurses across BC, set up pickets in Vancouver and Surrey last week, citing what it said were thousands of cases of manager intimidation when nurses refused non-nursing duties. Health employers have said nurses are not being pushed to fulfill non-nursing duties and have vowed to look into the cases. Veteran mediators Vince Reddy and Amanda Rogers were appointed to help settle the disagreement between the nurses and the employers last week, but the union says that won't stop job action at the moment. The union is scheduled to picket Royal Jubilee Hospital and South Island Surgical Center, both in Greater Victoria, on Tuesday. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published July 13th, 2026. This next article is about Quebec. Quebec announces plan to train more aerospace workers as demand surges. And this article is also written by the Canadian Press. Quebec's economy minister is announcing a series of initiatives aimed at training more aerospace workers. Bernard Drainville relieved the plans north of Montreal and Mirabel, which is home to a major aerospace hub. He announced that a technical college in Longueuil, and that's Longueuil, the École Nationale d'Aérotechnique, will increase its enrollment capacity by 70% in its aircraft mechanics and avionics programs. In the longer term, the government also plans to establish a second campus on Montreal's North Shore. A new vocational training program will also be launched at Bombardier's facilities in Montreal and a second in Mirabel near the airport and several aerospace companies. These will initially be pilot projects but are expected to become permanent in the fall of 2027. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published July 13th, 2026. Our next article is under investigations, and the title is Canada's $573 million Veterans Program Flooded with Urgent Concerns from Retired Soldiers. VAC said it works with stakeholders to identify issues and make improvements so that veterans get timely, high-quality rehab services. And this article is written by Frédéric Plante, Plante, who is an investigative reporter. Internal federal government records show that a controversial rehabilitation program remains beleaguered with concerns from military veterans struggling to get the care they were promised. Over a period of 3 months earlier this year, Veterans Affairs Canada, VAC, received 1,200 submissions for escalations from staff all over the country as former retired military personnel face delays and other issues. The data suggests the scope of veteran frustration and the publicly funded program is larger than previously known. A recent STAR investigation found that veterans undergoing rehabilitation for physical injuries or mental health issues are drowning in bureaucracy, being forced to change service providers, given inadequate care, and facing threats to their benefits. Veterans said their health worsened as a result. How many veterans are struggling with the program? As part of that story's reporting, VAC said in February that the department had received 436 complaints in total since the implementation of the current rehabilitation program in late 2022. Complaints range widely from portal usability issues to rescheduled appointments or concerns about care received, VAC said at the time. After the STAR's first report in March, Minister of Veterans Affairs Jill McKnight said that her department would launch an independent review of the $573 million rehabilitation program contract. The company running the program is Partners in Canadian Veterans Rehabilitation Services, PCVRS, a joint venture between a subsidiary of Loblaw Companies Limited and a business owned by U.S. private equity firm Madison Dearborn Partners. PCVRS declined to comment for this story and referred all questions to VAC. The records obtained by the Toronto Star list the top 5 issues behind VAC staff submissions for escalations: delayed rehabilitation services, delay in receiving reports, veteran dissatisfaction, inaccurate or incomplete documents, and absence or delayed updates to case managers. But the escalation process is a hollow exercise, with VAC consistently siding with initial PCVRS decisions According to the Touref El Daner, according to Tofik El Daher, and it's EL-DAHER, the national president of the Union of Veterans Affairs Employees, which includes VAC case managers. This creates a profound sense of helplessness among staff and leading to unacceptable delays for veterans waiting for answers, he said. Emails showed that VAC tracked staff submissions for escalations from February 11th to May 13th. VAC spokesperson Marc Lecoutre said that tracking was put in place temporarily to give staff a way to document challenges, frustrations, and operational pain points. Lecoutre said that a submission for an escalation is different from a complaint, which he described as a formal expression of dissatisfaction submitted by a participant or provider. Escalations, he said, are submitted by VAC staff who need support on issues that are typically urgent, complex, and that they are unable to resolve themselves. VAC works with stakeholders to identify issues and make improvements so the veterans get timely, high-quality rehabilitation services, Lecoutre added. Rehab program has faced criticism for misrepresenting results. Internal training documents for VAC case managers detail steps they are required to take to avoid an escalation. Important, before initiating a formal escalation, it is important to consider whether the issue can be effectively managed through collaboration, consultation, or other routine problem-solving approaches, one document said. Lecoutre said that not all staff submissions required an escalation, and many, if not the vast majority, of the 1,200 submissions would be smaller issues. Distinctions between the two processes, which cover many of the same problems, are not always clear. In an example of issues leading to escalations, VAC training documents refer to complaints raised by participants about PCVRS staff or rehabilitation professionals. The rate of formal complaints has really spiked, with 86 between February and June, according to Lecoutre. VAC and PCVRS have previously faced criticism for misrepresenting the rehabilitation program's results. In May, the Star reported that surveys touted as evidence of success had excluded hundreds of participants who reported stable or worse outcomes while undergoing rehabilitation. Blake Richards, a conservative MP and vice chair of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs, said at the time that he was disappointed that the Minister of Veterans Affairs and her officials would deliberately mislead Canadians and veterans. El Daher of the Union of Veterans Affairs Employees told the committee in June that PCVRS had failed to deliver promised improvements to the program since it took it over. We are calling for the non-renewal of the current private contract and for the repartition of rehabilitation services back into the VAC, he said. The contract with PCVRS expires at the end of the year, but could be renewed for up to 6 years. The government has not yet said whether it will seek renewals. In late May, VAC put out a call for bids on the contract for the independent review of the rehabilitation program and invited 15 organizations offering business, consulting, or change management services to participate. On Parliament Hill, lawmakers continue to hear concerns. Meanwhile, healthcare professionals and veterans have continued to report issues with the program to the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. In a recent brief submitted to the committee, Ottawa psychologist Lynn St. Pierre said that she observed a regression in therapeutic progress along with the intensification of psychological distress and symptoms related to operational trauma and operational stress injuries among a majority of veterans involved in the program. Conversely, she said, I also observed improvement in most veterans in my practice once they had exited the program. Erica Bilopotochanova, a veteran who was medically released from the military last year, said in another brief that the delivery of rehabilitation services has been fragmented, inconsistent, and at times contradictory to the program's stated purpose. Her treating therapist was excluded from the assessment and rehabilitation process, she said, an allegation made by other veterans and healthcare providers featured in the STARS March investigation. Despite ongoing treatment and documented progress, no effort was made to consult or incorporate clinical input from the professional most familiar with my condition. Bilopotochanova stated. VAC records also show a third way to express dissatisfaction when a veteran has concerns but doesn't formally complain. For example, if they tell a PCVRS staffer that they were really upset about something but now they are fine, or if they mention prior problems with the program that led to them getting legal involvement. In these scenarios, PCVRS staff must write a professional case note about the concern. Legal Couture said that such concerns are not tracked. And Frederic Plante is a Toronto-based investigative reporter for The Star. You can reach him at his email, which is FPLANTE@THESTAR.ca. Our next article is about Ontario, and the title is Bonnie Crombie to run for mayor of Mississauga, Ontario, vying for her old job. And this was written by the Canadian Press. After a short stint leading the Ontario Liberals, Bonnie Crombie, and that's Crombie, is looking to get her old job back as mayor of Mississauga, Ontario. Crombie wrote to supporters in a message obtained by the Canadian Press that she intends to register as a mayoral candidate on Tuesday. She will be up against incumbent Mayor Carolyn Parrish, as well as other candidates that include city councilors Alvin Tejo, and that's Tedjo, and Deepika Damerla, and that's Damerla. Crombie served as Mississauga's mayor for a decade before leaving midway through her third term in 2024 to lead the Ontario Liberals. She stepped down from that role early this year following lukewarm support in a vote at the party's 2025 annual general meeting after a snap provincial election that saw Crombie fail to win a seat in the legislature. Crombie first entered politics at age 47 after a long business career and has also served as Liberal MP and Mississauga City Councillor. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published July 12, 2026. This article is under the World section. In a sweet discovery, astronomers find sugar lurking in the space between stars. And this article is written by Adathi Ramakrishnan, and that's Ramakrishnan of the Associated Press. The space between stars just got a little sweeter. Astronomers have detected a type of sugar in space that's also found in raspberries and self-tanners. The sugar called erythrulose, and that's ERYTHRULOSE, lurks in what's called the interstellar medium, thin clouds of gas and dust littered between stars. Sugar does more than sweeten tea and powdered donuts. Different varieties fuel our cells and even make up DNA. Scientists are itching to know how sugars form because they're a key ingredient for life as we know it. Using two dish-shaped radio telescopes in Spain, researchers collected data from a large gas cloud near the center of the Milky Way. They identified the sugar in gas form by comparing telescope signals to samples in the lab. It's the latest kind of sugar detected in space, in a region crossed by NASA's twin Voyager, the farthest spacecraft to ever travel from Earth. The results were published Monday in the journal Nature Astronomy. Scientists have found interesting chemistry in our galaxy, including building blocks for genetic material and parts of the cell. They spotted a cousin to table sugar near the center of the Milky Way about 25 years ago, and black grains from asteroid Bennu, Bennu, retrieved by NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft, yielded other sugars, including a key DNA ingredient. The latest sugar isn't essential for life, but can easily convert to a form that's thought to be crucial to kickstarting life on Earth. And it's one of the most complex sugars spotted so far, said astrophysicist Erica Hamden, Hamden, with the University of Arizona. It's a pristine example of the stuff that's just floating out in the galaxy, said Hamden, who had no role in the new research. These interstellar investigations are all about understanding how life got started. Did faraway comets or space rocks deliver the essential ingredients to us? Or were the essential components already here that eventually gave rise to our solar system? The new sugar lends evidence to the latter theory. Researchers want to look for more sugars in space and learn about how they convert to different forms. Finding them in one spot means they're likely also hiding in distant corners of the galaxy along with other important bits, said study author Izichun Jimenez Serra, and that's JIMENEZ-SERRA, an astrophysicist at the Center for Astrobiology in Spain. The key ingredients for the origin of life could be present in other regions across the galaxy, opening the possibility for life to develop somewhere else in the universe, Jimenez Serra said. And the bottom of the article also states the Associated Press and Science Department receives support from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute's Department of Science Education and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The AP is solely responsible for all content. And you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is under the sports section, and the title is Montreal Olympic Games Left a Legacy That's Still Being Felt 50 Years Later. Montreal. When reflecting on the 1976 Montreal Games, it's hard not to think of the controversies surrounding the Olympic Stadium, whose problem play, construction, and ballooning cost earned it the nickname the Big O. And this article is written by Frédéric Daigle, Daigle of the Canadian Press. When reflecting on the 1976 Montreal Games, it's hard not to think of the controversies surrounding the Olympic Stadium, whose problem played construction and ballooning cost earned it the nickname the Big O. But 50 years later, key players in the Olympic movement say the first games on Canadian soil had a lasting impact on Quebec's sporting culture that went far beyond those negative headlines. These games left a great legacy, says Thomas Bach, B-A-C-H, who is the honorary president of the International Olympic Committee and a 1976 gold medalist in the team foil fencing event. I remember the controversies at the time, like with all the games to follow elsewhere, he said by video from Lausanne, Switzerland in June. Having visited Montreal afterwards, seeing the Olympic Park, the Olympic Village, and the stadium, and seeing that Montreal and Canada have since become premier hosts for international sporting events like the Road World Cycling Championships you're welcoming this year, all of this is because of these first games. Canada, he added, put itself on the world map as a major organizer of sporting events. Eric Miles, M-Y-L-E-S, the chief sport officer at the Canadian Olympic Committee, said that he sometimes hears people express regret about the Olympic Stadium. Over the years, the venue has attracted negative press for its chunks of falling concrete, a faulty retractable roof, and a $1 billion price tag that took Montrealers 3 decades to pay off. What was unfortunate about the Olympic Stadium was the corruption surrounding its construction, Miles said in an interview at the committee's offices earlier this year. It didn't have anything to do with the games. He said that Montreal Games were the first to be profitable in terms of operating expenses, which surprises people to hear. It's crazy when you say that. People look at you and don't believe you, Miles said. They were incredibly well organized. Claude Mailhot, Mailhot, a sports broadcaster who covered 21 Olympic Games, including in Montreal and Vancouver 2010, also believed the Games were a success. The Montreal Games worked so well, despite the cost for the stadium and the criticism then Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau, Drapeau, received, that if Montreal hadn't done a good job, Calgary and Vancouver would have never got to host Olympic Games, he said. Bach believes that while the Games attracted controversy, people's attitudes have shifted over time. Now, with a little hindsight, people can realize that it wasn't debt, but that Canada made a very good investment, he said. Canada has been seeing a return on that investment for several years. The Games were also the catalyst to build some of the country's first major sporting venues, many of which are still in use today. Those include the Claude Robillard, and that's Robillard, Robillard Sports Complex, the Olympic Basin, and the stadium, which is currently getting a new roof. There are a lot of things that are still there and that have really benefited the Montreal, Quebec, and Canadian communities, Miles said. That was really a plus. Tricia Smith, the president of the Canadian Olympic Committee, added that the Games led to the creation of a number of provincial sports federations. In recent years, some 40% of Canada's Olympic team has been comprised of Quebec athletes, which may also be part of the Montreal legacy. As an athlete, you could see the support Quebec has for its athletes, said Smith, a 4-time Olympian who won a silver medal in rowing in Los Angeles in 1984. She said that enthusiasm continues today. Quebec has a fantastic culture of support for its athletes, whether it's the spectators who turn out in person or the coverage provided by the media, she said. Miles agrees the structures and organizations that support athletes are particularly strong in the province. Those include provincial sports departments, businesses that sponsor events, comprehensive media coverage, and strong citizen support. He said the province has developed an expertise and is often considered avant-gardiste. Yes, it exists elsewhere in Canada, but it's much more fragmented, he said. In some way, a lot of that comes from the 1976 Games. That includes the Education Department's Sport Études ETUDES program, which allowed student athletes to balance their education with competitive goals. Some extremists want the focus to be solely on the development, but we can't abandon excellent, Miles said. It's the balance between the two that is needed. When it's done right, there is a great place for it. I feel the Games really help foster that, the desire to be the best. Mailhot believes the 1976 Games helped to boost the province's sporting culture in a way that is still being felt 50 years later. It opened up the minds of people in Montreal and probably all of Quebec that there was more than just professional sports, he said. He believes the Olympics inspired many people to launch their own amateur sporting careers or to start to compete more seriously. Maybe some young people saw that and told themselves, maybe distant running might interest me. I run already, but now maybe I can run for medals, he said. I'm sure the Olympics were a catalyst and a positive influence. And this report was also written with files from Michel Lamarche, LAMARCE, and this report by the Canadian Press was first published July 13th, 2026. Our next article is under business, and it is an opinion. The title is, He Spoke Out Against Development at Mississauga Mall. They sued, he won. And this article is written by Bob Aaron, Aaron, who is contributing columnist. And Bob is a Toronto real estate lawyer and contributing columnist for The Star. He is also a member of the Home Construction Regulatory Authority Consumer Advisory Council. And he can be reached at BOB@AARON.ca. Most Canadians assume we have the right to speak out when a controversial development is proposed in our neighborhoods. We can attend public meetings, email City Hall, photograph construction activity, and raise concerns about planning safety or the environment. These activities are fundamental to our democratic rights. But what happens if a developer responds not with answers, but with a lawsuit seeking hundreds of thousands of dollars? That question was at the heart of a significant May 2026 decision of the Ontario Court of Appeal. In 2022, Sheridan Retail Incorporated started to redevelop Sheridan Mall in Mississauga. The project included renovation of existing storefronts and a proposal to build two 15-story condominiums. Pierre Roy was an engineering student and member of the local residents association. He publicly opposed aspects of the development and raised concerns about sustainability, affordable housing, and allegedly unsafe and unlawful construction practices. He attended meetings, communicated with city officials, photographed aspects of the construction, and raised concerns with the city about planning, public safety, and compliance with municipal bylaws and the building code. The developer sued Roy, claiming $300,000 for defamation, trespass, inducing breach of contract, and intentional interference with economic relations, alleging he had crossed the line between legitimate criticism and unlawful conduct. In response, Roy brought a court motion seeking to dismiss a lawsuit under Ontario's anti-SLAPP legislation. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. Lawsuits like the Sheridan claim are often intended to discourage public criticism by forcing defendants to spend enormous amounts of money and time defending themselves. In 2015, Ontario enacted Section 137.1 of the Courts of Justice Act. It allows judges to dismiss lawsuits at an early stage if they arise from expression on a matter of public interest, unless the plaintiff can show the case has substantial merit, the defendant has no valid defense, and the public interest is continuing the lawsuit. And the public interest in continuing the lawsuit outweighs the public interest in protecting freedom of expression. At the hearing of Roy's motion on May 2025, Justice Renu Maldhane, Mandhane, concluded Roy's comments dealt with matters of undeniable public interest, municipal planning, redevelopment, public safety, and building compliance. Justice Maldhane dismissed Sheridan's action, awarded Roy $25,000 in damages under the anti-SLAPP SLAPP legislation, and granted him legal costs of $394,057. The judge wrote that Sheridan's action was a quintessential gag suit aimed at curtailing public expression. Sheridan appealed, and in May, the Ontario Court of Appeal largely upheld the decision. It emphasized that courts must look beyond the legal labels attached to a lawsuit and determine its true purpose. The real question is whether a lawsuit is fundamentally aimed at discouraging protected public participation. In Roy's case, the answer remained yes. The Court of Appeal confirmed that the discussion of municipal planning, construction practices, public safety, and environmental concerns lies at the heart of democratic debate. Residents should not face financial ruin simply because they express concerns or communicate with public officials. The appeal court affirmed the dismissal of the Sheridan lawsuit and the $25,000 damages award, but reduced the cost in the lower court to $75,000. Roy was also awarded another $20,000 in costs for the appeal. His total award was $120,000. The ruling offers important lessons for both developers and the public. For developers, litigation should not become a substitute for public relations. Major projects inevitably attract questions about density, traffic, environmental impacts, infrastructure, and safety. Those concerns are often sincerely held, even if they ultimately prove to be unfounded. Suing critics may generate far more negative publicity than the criticism itself. For residents, however, the decision is not a license to say anything without consequence. Ontario's anti-SLAPP, anti-SLAPP legislation protects responsible participation in matters of public interest. It does not shield knowingly false statements, malicious accusations, or conduct that falls outside legitimate public debate. Citizens remain responsible for ensuring factual allegations have a reasonable basis. As redevelopment accelerates across Ontario, conflicts between developers and neighborhood residents are becoming more common. The public consultation process can function properly only if citizens feel free to participate without fear of financially crippling legislation or litigation. Our next article is once again in business under personal finance, in its opinion, the financial hills I'll happily die on. And this article is written by Leslie Ann Skorgi, contributing columnist. And Leslie Ann is a Toronto-based personal finance columnist and a freelance contributing columnist for The Star. Social media has been flooded lately with experts sharing the hills they'll die on, the opinions they'll defend no matter how unpopular. Doctors, teachers, chefs, nutritionists, and therapists have all weighed in. As someone who has spent more than 2 decades helping Canadians improve their financial well-being, I have a few of my own. Some will make people nod in agreement, others might spark a debate. That's okay. The best financial advice often challenges what we've always believed. And so, here are the financial hills I'd happily die on. Budgeting isn't the goal, behavior changes. People don't fail financially because they can't use a spreadsheet. They fail because money is emotional. I've met people earning 6 figures who live paycheck to paycheck, and others earning half as much who quietly build wealth by consistently investing and reducing debt. The difference isn't mathematical ability, it's habits. A budget, no matter how detailed, won't change your life if your spending is driven by stress, unhealthy habits, boredom, or comparison. Until you understand why you spend, no budgeting app in the world will save you. What changes your financial life are balanced saving habits and spending on what matters most. That's one reason financial therapy and coaching are growing so quickly. Financial therapists and qualified coaches help people understand the why behind their money habits so they can change them for good. Try this. The next time you spend money you hadn't planned to, pause and ask yourself, what problem am I trying to solve? Stress? Boredom? Convenience? Loneliness? That simple question can reveal spending patterns no budget ever will. You probably don't have an income problem, you have a spending alignment problem. Whenever I say this, someone points out that wages haven't kept pace with inflation. They're right. Most Canadians genuinely do need higher incomes. But I've also seen countless people earning excellent salaries who wonder where all their money went each month. Too many purchases are made to improve our mood instead of our lives. If your spending doesn't reflect what matters most to you, earning another $20,000 a year probably won't solve that problem. It will simply finance a more expensive version of the same habits. Try this. Look back at your last month of spending and ask yourself one question. Would I happily spend money on this again? If yes, keep it. If not, you found money to redirect towards something that matters more. You don't need to give up lattes. You need to stop making six-figure mistakes. Personal finance has spent decades obsessing over tiny purchases while ignoring the decisions that actually determine wealth. The biggest financial outcomes usually come from a handful of choices: where you live, what you drive, who you build your life with, whether you negotiate your salary, how successful you are at steering clear of consumer debt, and how consistently you invest. Nobody retires early because they skipped enough coffee. They retire because they consistently got the big decisions right. Try this. Instead of trying to save $5 today, spend an hour this weekend reviewing the 3 biggest drivers of your wealth: your housing costs, transportation, and income. Small tweaks to those decisions can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. Stop waiting for the right time to start investing. It doesn't exist. This is one of the biggest financial mistakes I see. People tell themselves they'll start saving for retirement after they pay off their credit cards, after they buy a home, after the kids get older, after they get a raise. Life has a funny way of replacing one financial priority with another. The debt gets paid off, then the furnace breaks. The kids need braces, a vacation comes up, suddenly another 5 years has passed. Meanwhile, compounding was quietly waiting for no one. Ironically, saving is often the cure for reoccurring debt, not the reward for finally becoming debt-free. Having even a modest emergency fund means the next unexpected expense doesn't end up back on a credit card. Building the habit of investing also changes how you think about money. You begin paying your future self first instead of hoping there's something left over at the end of the month. The perfect financial moment rarely arrives. Start small if you have to. $50 a month invested consistently will do more for your future than waiting years for the mythical day when everything in your financial life finally feels under control. Try this. Before the day is over, set up an automatic investment or savings transfer, even if it's only $25 or $50 a month. You can always increase it later. What matters most is starting the habit. Being frugal and living well are not opposites. Some people hear the word frugal and picture deprivation. I picture intention. Being wise, frugal with money isn't about spending less, it's about wasting less so you can spend more on what genuinely improves your life. That's a very different mindset. The goal isn't to become the richest person in the cemetery. It's to build a life where your money supports your values instead of competing with them. Wealth isn't created by saying no to everything. It's created by getting really good at knowing what deserves a wholehearted yes. Try this. Before buying something, ask yourself one question. Will I still be glad I bought this 6 months from now? If the answer is yes, enjoy it guilt-free. If not, think twice. If I had to choose just one hill to die on, it's this. Money doesn't build the life you want by accident. It grows wherever your habits point it. Build habits that your future self will thank you for, because at the end of the day, financial well-being isn't about having more money, it's about having more choices. And that's a hill I'll happily die on. This next article is in the Canada section, and the title is 5 Things to Watch For in the Canadian Business World in the Coming Week. And this was written by the Canadian Press. So first is ARC shareholder vote. ARC Rehorses Limited shareholders are set to vote Tuesday on a deal that will see the company acquired by Shell pick in a stock and cash deal valued at $22 billion, including assumed debt. The deal gives Shell access to ARC holdings in the prolific Montney, Montney Shale Formation. Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada will make an interest rate announcement and release its latest monetary policy report on Wednesday. The decision comes as the annual inflation rate rose to 3.2% in May, pushed higher by gasoline prices. The central bank is widely expected to keep its policy interest rate on hold at 2.25%. WestJet flight attendants vote. A strike vote by WestJet flight attendants, represented by the Canadian Union of Public Employees, is set to wrap up on Wednesday. The voting, which began on July 8th, comes as the union says it continues to negotiate key issues, including wages, compensation, scheduling, work-life balance, and other workplace improvements. If the flight attendants approve a strike mandate, the union says the earliest date a legal strike or employer lockout could occur is August the 2nd. Cogeco results. Cogeco, COGECO Incorporated, and Cogeco Communications are expected to release their third quarter financial results after markets close on Wednesday, followed by a conference call with financial analysts on Thursday morning. The company said last month that they expected to take a non-cash impairment charge of about $1.7 billion for the quarter related to its U.S. telecommunications business. Housing data. Two key data points for the Canadian housing market are expected this week. The Canadian Real Estate Association is expected to release its home sale figures for June on Wednesday, while Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp will release housing start numbers on Thursday. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published July 12, 2026. Our next article is under federal politics, and the title is Ottawa City Councillors Fuming as Unannounced Fireworks Show Follows Canada Day Storm. And this article is written by Dylan Robertson of the Canadian Press. Ottawa's emergency manager apologized today after an unannounced fireworks show rocked parts of the city last week. The surprise display of pyrotechnics took place after 11 p.m. on July 9th as music fans were starting to file out of the popular Blue Fest concert festival site just west of downtown. The fireworks were the ones that were supposed to be set up on Canada Day but had been canceled after severe storms and flash floods shuttered the annual national birthday celebrations. The Federal Heritage Department says setting off the fireworks in the city was safer than dismantling the launch area and moving them elsewhere, and says it chose not to inform the public in order to prevent crowds from gathering without sufficient security and medical services. Ottawa Mayor Mark Sutcliffe, Sutcliffe, says he was not told in advance, and several city councillors have demanded answers after they received dozens of complaints. Ryan Perrault, Perrault, the general manager of the City of Ottawa's Emergency and Protective Services Department, apologized for the incident and says he is still trying to track down who decided to set them off that late on a weeknight during the quiet period mandated by a new city bylaw. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published July 13th, 2026. This article is in the business section, and the title is Thoroughbred Horse Racing Purse Enhancements Announced for Rest of 2026 Campaign. And this article is also by the Canadian Press. Thoroughbred horse racing purses will be increasing this season. Woodbine Entertainment, the Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association of Ontario, and Ontario Racing announced Monday purse enhancements for the 2026 campaign. Last month, the Ontario government earmarked an additional $35 million annually to the racing industry over the next 5 years. Last week, Ontario Racing announced Standardbred Racing will receive over $14 million in additional money. Thoroughbred Racing would get over $10 million, while the quarter horse industry would get $780,000. The remainder will be earmarked for racetrack infrastructure, running programs, capital improvements, and administration. These purse enhancements represent an important investment in our horse people and in the continued growth of the thoroughbred racing in Ontario, said Mike Copeland, CEO of Woodbine Entertainment. These investments will support owners and trainers while continuing to enhance the quality and competitiveness of racing at Woodbine. The full amount of the new purse funding for the Woodbine racetrack will be distributed over the remainder of the 26 season. Some of the enhancements will include overnight purses for races with claiming prizes of $25,000, and more will increase by 9%, while those of $15,000 and below will increase by 3.5%. The total funding for the stakes program will increase by 16% through higher guaranteed purses and new Ontario bred bonuses. Woodbine's Open Stakes program will also receive significant investment as Grade 2 stakes currently contested for $175,000 will increase to $200,000. Grade 3 stakes currently run for $150,000 will increase to $175,000. Listed stakes currently contested for $100,000 will increase to $125,000, while 2-year-old stakes for Canadian foaled horses, including the Cup and Saucer Stakes, Princess Elizabeth Stakes, and Coronation for Futurity, FUTURITY, will go from $250,000 to $300,000. Grade 2 and Grade 3 stakes already offering purses at or above the new levels will remain unchanged. 2 new stake races, each carrying a purse of $125,000, will be added to the fall stake schedule. They will be contested as sprints, with one open to 3-year-olds and the other restricted to 3-year-old fillies. The Woodbine Oaks, the first leg of the Triple Tiara, will be contested for $750,000, which now includes a $250,000 bonus for Ontario breds. The Bison City Stakes and Wonder Where Stakes, the second and third legs, will each carry purses of $350,000, including a $100,000 bonus for Ontario breds. The Prince of Wales Stakes and Breeders' Stakes, the second and third jewels of the Canadian Triple Crown, will both be contested for $500,000, including a $100,000 bonus for Ontario breds. And this report by the Canadian Press was first published July 13th, 2026. And you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 13th, 2026 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Judy, that's me, and it has been such a pleasure and honor to read to you. Take care of your amazing, awesome selves and have a most wonderful day. Thank you so much for listening.